Hi everyone, and welcome to this No Talk. I'm Sam and I'm part of the Avinode team, and I'm super excited to be your host for this next hour. I hope you're excited as me about this event, and we have some fun stuff coming up that I think you will enjoy a lot. So 2022 sets a special mark for us at Avinode because we're celebrating 20 years. And during this year, we've been looking back at as a team at what have we been doing and what achievements and accomplishments have we done. And we're so happy with what has happened. But there's two things that really sticks out in our reflections on these past 20 years. The first one is our great collaboration with all of you guys that are joining here today. Some of you may have been with us from the very start, and some of you may have joined us more recently. But we really believe that it's together with you guys that we have been able to make such great accomplishments and development in our industry together. And that's something we really enjoy, and we also want to continue working closer together with all of you to make sure that we make the best of the future of the business. The second thing that I am astonished about our team here at Avinode is that everyone is so focused on the future. So even if we look back a little bit, our focus is so on the future and how to continue developing, making solutions, and making things that make sense for you guys, and that also helps us as an industry to move forward, be digital, be innovative, and all of that we want to be. So, with this in mind, we have set the theme for this event to being about the future of business aviation. And we're going to zoom into some different elements and things here, which I think is super, super exciting. But I would like to check in with you guys, first of all, to see what you think about the future of our industry and of what lays ahead. So we're going to pop in a little quiz here, or a few questions about what do you feel? What's your sentiment about the future? So let's pull the poll up and you can just answer. We have 30 seconds and then we will see what everyone feels like. We get some votes in here. I think you will soon be able to also see the result of what we are feeling. All right. Thank you all for voting about what you feel like. We have mixed feelings, of course, about the future, but there is some optimism there, which is super great. And we may not be able to cover all of the challenges and things we may think is a struggle for the future, but hopefully this event will give us some ideas and thoughts and inspiration to how we can move forward and make something great of the next that's coming. Talking about next, it's time for me to present our first speaker, Daniel Levine. He's a future trend expert, and he's one of the best in the world, I think. I've listened to him a few times, and it's so inspiring to listen to trends and how they connect. And we asked Daniel to actually dig a little bit deeper into aviation industry and travel to see what may be in the future for us. And I think we have Daniel online here. Hi, Daniel.
Yes, hi, Joel. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. I know we had some technical issues, but it worked out in the end. That's awesome. And you are in New York, I understand.
I am in New York, and the tech issues, it's so interesting, that the world is moving so quickly, and sometimes technology doesn't quite catch up, but it's wonderful when we figure it out in the end. And so we're here, and Avinode asked me to take a look at sort of what the world will look like in the next 20 years. Now that Avinode is celebrating its 20th anniversary. And so I thought it was a wonderful project, and I was doing a special research specifically for this presentation. And one of the things I came across was a magazine from Paris in 1900. And there was an illustrator who was taking a look at what the world would look like 100 years later. So what the world would look like in 2000, according to an illustrator in 1900. And this is one of his illustrations. It's what I guess it would look like to have Roombas around the house doing your cleaning. Of course, this illustrator didn't have the idea of plug-in electricity. In the next slide, there's a picture of what the illustrator thought it would look like to have telemedicine. This idea, are we seeing the telemedicine slide? Is that coming up? I'm not sure. But anyway, here it is. The illustrator had a pretty good idea of what it would look like to have a doctor talk to you by computer. I like those hands. But my favorite is this the last illustration, which was this illustrator's sort of concept of what FaceTime might look like in 1900. Really sort of got it right. I mean, we don't have those flying cars in the background any longer, or yet, I should say. But what I think he got or she got exactly right, is here you have two people sitting together talking on the phone, completely ignoring each other. So in some ways, they were absolutely right. But it's amazing to me how fast the world is changing. And if you look at from when Kitty Hawk, the Wright brothers invented Kitty Hawk, and their first flight was in 1903. And then the first moon landing was in 1969. And it's only 66 years apart. It's amazing how fast the world changes. And technology has happened so quickly that a lot of people don't realize that just last year we landed a helicopter on Mars. And if you look at this next slide is the picture of the helicopter. It's called Ingenuity. It landed on Mars last year. And the fact that most people, or many people, don't even know that this is a fact right now, for me, shows us how quickly things move in the world. And it's just amazing to think about what the next 20 years will look like. Joel introduced me as sort of a futurist. I like to think of myself more as a trends expert. Looking into the future is super hard. And what I love about this chart, this graph, is that if you look at this trend line of the Dow Jones Industrial Average over 20 years, it's hard to tell where that trend is going. Is it going up or down in 20 years? And what's really counterintuitive about futurism or trend spotting is that it's actually easier to understand or know what's going to happen 100 years from now than 20 years from now. And here's a slide of the Dow Jones Industrial Average over 100 years, where you can see it's a clear graph up. We can easily extrapolate from this that the next 100 years, the Dow Jones Industrial Average will continue to go up. But if you just take a small slice of 20 years, it's really hard to tell. Now, when most people think about trends, they think about statistics like global GDP could increase by 75% by 2042, which is amazingly important for businesses, of course, to see those sorts of statistics. But just as important is to look at your business from the perspective of sort of the holistic world, the way customers see it. And so, I bet you never thought of your business connected to, Lego or Unilever or Apple or Patagonia or all the other sort of businesses that are out there that you can see on the next slide. It's when we work in trends, we sort of think about that there's two parts of the trends mind. And one part is statistics, there's strong numbers, and we work hand in glove with companies that do that. But the other part of it is what I like to think of as sort of the sexy part. What are those people thinking and feeling? What is the future going to look like? Not just because of strong numbers, but because it's actually people populating the future, and we're the ones who are building that technology and making those changes. So I brought with me today a few different trends and under different topic headings. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the future of transport. There's so many things that are going to change the world in the next 20 years. But what I wanted to do in this presentation is not just talk about sort of new inventions that will happen in 20 years, but really sort of have you think about how our world will change in 20 years, what the world we will be living in will look like. And so when you think of it, there's so many very big changes that are happening, and one of them is autonomous vehicles, which is going to have the first major impact really when it comes to autonomous trucking, because autonomous trucks are going to be much easier to get on the road. Most of the uh, most of the traveling that they do will be on highways. And so it's much easier for the autonomous equipment to understand how to ride on a highway than the complicatedness of figuring out how to negotiate city streets. And so I believe that in 20 years, we're going to be seeing a lot of autonomous trucks on our highways, long before we see autonomous trucks or cars on our city streets. It's going to change the way that cargo is shipped. We're going to be seeing cargo not shipped only by truck, but also by balloon. Right now, it's very difficult to get cargo to hard to reach places over mountains, and those last few miles or kilometers there are going to be shipped by these sorts of air balloons. I've seen at least a dozen different companies now that are working on this, and from what we can tell, this sort of technology will be quite normal 20 years from now. When it comes to ships on the water, we will see autonomous cargo ships, again, long before we'll be seeing autonomous cars be regular part of our lives. In fact, just last month, the first autonomous cargo ship made a long journey. That's without any humans on board, completely run from afar. And the advantage of this is multifold. One is that you don't have to have a crew on board, and so the ships can go for much longer than they can right now. It will eliminate or reduce the problem of piracy, because you can build the ships in such a way that they're very hard to board, and if you were to board them, very hard to control, because the control rooms can be inside giant safes, basically, and cheaper to run, because you won't have to pay a crew, which at this point they say is about 17% of the cost of ocean container shipping. So where does that leave us with autonomous cars? Well, as I said, when you look at the world 100 years from now, it's easier to tell what's going to happen than 20 years from now. So I think I could feel pretty confident saying that 100 years from now, we will have autonomous cars and it'll be normalized for all of us. Whether that's going to be normal for us 20 years from now, I think that jury is still out. And I'd be curious to hear what you all have to say about that. For me, the most fascinating thing about autonomous vehicles isn't just that it changes our transport, but it changes the places in which we live, like having wireless charging for parking, or just cities themselves. And here's an example of what a city might look like once it's changed because of autonomous cars, because autonomous cars will be speaking to each other, so they can travel much faster on narrower lanes. You'd only need one. It would mean that inside a city, you could have much more pedestrian space. You wouldn't necessarily need to have parking on most streets, because cars could park further away and then be summoned when you need them. And so from what we're seeing, this sort of work is already starting to be done in cities to figure out how to change and manage the cities for the advent of autonomous cars. And certainly by 20 years from now, we will be living in cities where they're starting to change, actually, the cities we live in to be more pedestrian friendly and sort of pedestrian first rather than car first, the way most cities are built right now. Similarly, we're seeing changes that are happening in trains at the moment, and there's billions of dollars of investment being put into trains, especially in Europe, Asia, and Africa. Unfortunately, not so much in my country. And if you've just had your ear to the media, one of the things that we're hearing quite a lot about now is people taking short to medium-sized trips are sort of being nudged over to trains, because people are thinking about whether airplanes are going to be as good for the environment as trains. Although I do have something to say about that, because in the future, airplanes will be just as good for the environment. When it comes to packaging, from this slide, we can see that there's a lot happening in autonomous drones. And in fact, my company is working with the US Post Office right now on drone mailboxes about where to deliver these packages. And for me, again, what's so interesting is the way that these drones will be changing cities so that mailboxes will look different. The way that we get our packages or perhaps shop will change. We might be shopping in stores in 20 years that don't have so much stock in the shop themselves because you just buy what you want when you try it on, feel it in the store, and they just have it delivered to you. Those drones will require that we rethink the way that our airspace is created. And so there's a lot of people now working on drone zones, drone flight zones, so that we need to change the way that our airspace is being used for airplanes on the top, then drones, and other local flying vehicles. All of this is being rethought right now. Now, a lot of people ask me, where will flying cars be in 20 years, or maybe even 100 years? And when I think about flying cars, it's something that we've been talking about probably for most of our careers. And I just don't think they're going to happen. X on flying cars, because if you see the way that people drive in regular cars, you think they're going to allow these same people to fly in flying cars? No way. Not going to happen until the flying cars are autonomous. And then I suppose it will happen. But 20 years from now will not be the age of flying cars. The next look at 20 years, let's talk about the future of luxury a little bit. One thing that's just a truism in our world is that the rich are getting richer. It's a fact. And when you look at graphs of this, it's clear to see. One thing that's really interesting, I think, from this particular one is that you could see that disparity between the super rich and everyone else is much larger in the United States than it is in Europe. But it's going up in Europe too, that share of national income earned by the top 10% of earners. But what's just as interesting is not only are the rich getting richer, but that everyone is getting richer. There's a lot more rich people now than there were 20 years ago. And 20 years from now, there will be many, many more rich people than there are now. So ultra high net worth individuals, those are people who are making over $100 million. There's many thousands now, and there will be tens of thousands 20 years from now. So for any of you who are selling to these people, the market is looking good. Just as an aside, throughout my entire career in travel and tourism, working with travel and tourism clients, I've seen prices for regular hotel rooms or regular flights. They go up and down, but the expensive ones, the luxury side of the market, just keeps going in one direction. And again, extrapolating that to the next 20 years, we'll continue to see that. We do a lot of work in my business about understanding sentiment and sentiment analysis of what people who are in the luxury field are looking for, and this chart shows you what the sort of words that we see most about unique experiences, quality, service, exclusive. These are all sort of the things that people think about when they think about luxury. And one of the biggest is that one right in the middle about experiences. And we're seeing that just more and more, that's what people are looking for rather than things, experiences. I love this slide. It's a picture of the Hotel Kekslautinen. It's in northern Finland, and it's a glass igloo. So it invites you to lie back in your bed in the middle of the night and watch the northern lights in the middle of winter. And for me, that really sort of exemplifies this idea of experiences. But as does the next slide, which is comes from Airbnb experiences, where they invite people to have high tea with a sheep in England. Is a sheep? A sheep is yeah, that's both singular and plural. I guess with a sheep or sheep. And again, what the Airbnb experiences is one of the fastest parts, growing parts of Airbnb. And the reason is because people are looking for experiences rather than things. The idea of experiences means a lot of things. It could mean just having peace and quiet. And this is a slide from Japan Airlines where when you choose your seat on the airplane, they're now showing you where babies are sitting. So you can choose a seat that's in a quieter section, unless you absolutely love screaming babies. And then, of course, you can choose a seat next to one of those. When I first went to the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in Las Vegas, I was welcomed by this robot. This is Pepper the robot, and instead of a human, Pepper the robot came to me and helped me check in, and I thought that was super cool. And for a flash, I thought, is this the future of luxury? This really cool technology? But then very quickly, right after that, I started staying in hotels where the robots looked like this. And instead of having a human deliver room service to me, a robot rolled up to the door. The phone rings and says, your lunch is here. And you open the door and there's this robot. And a lot of things were happening around the world of trends at that time. And one thing that became really evident is that we're heading towards a future where 20 years from now, there's going to be this sort of bifurcation where human touch, which is very expensive, will be mostly on the luxury end. And robotics and computers will be for everybody else because they're cheap. And in my trend work, I see the same sorts of things happening across the industrial spectrum. And that's how it's not specific to travel and tourism. If you go into schools around the United States and in some other countries, you see a lot of students now who are learning using computers. And I don't mean that they're learning how to use computers. They're learning mathematics and geography on computers. But if you go into classrooms in Silicon Valley where the rich people are sending their kids, there's not a computer in sight. It's only human beings teaching other human beings. It's an example of this change in the future where computers, which are cheap, will be for the masses, and high touch will be for luxury environments. And again, not just in travel and tourism or flights, but everywhere. And that high touch experience we'll be seeing even more so, as I said, in other industries. This is an example of a high-end company called Net-a-Porter, where they're selling designer clothing. And their latest offering is where they send you choose on the phone or online clothing that you might want to have, or you just speak to somebody who asks you about yourself, and then they ship over to you in this car, let's say 10 different dresses, and then the person who comes with it waits and helps you try them on and helps you decide which look good on you, and then take back the ones you don't want and leave you with the ones that you do want. It's just an example of the high touch that we're seeing once again on the luxury side, but on the for everybody else, it's order Amazon online, and if you don't like it, you can return it. That's the cheap way to do it. As I said, since 2019 and even earlier, but since 2019, we've seen economy fares up 5%, but premium cabin fares up 36%. And what I thought was really cool is that the president of Delta Airlines just recently said, the big epiphany for us is that there's a much broader demand for premium cabins than just business travelers. That was the epiphany post-COVID. So COVID is changing the way that people are flying too, because they're realizing that there's a much bigger market for leisure travelers than there was before. It's not all just about business travel. The The next area that I'm speaking about today is about the future of sustainability. And sustainability, it's been a huge trend for the last decade or so. And basically, the main thing I want to say about it is that trends have a lot of inertia. And once they start going, they keep getting even more intense. And that's the case with sustainability too. If you ask me where sustainability will be 5 years from now, it will be even more part of our DNA than it is today. And again, we're seeing across the industrial spectrum so many companies responding to that. Bumblebee Tuna is showing how sustainable they are by putting codes on each one of their cans so that you can scan the can, go onto their website and see where that fish was caught, how sustainable it is, how it got shipped to you. Is it too much information for your tuna sandwich? Perhaps, but a good idea from a marketing perspective to show consumers that you get sustainability. Again, across the industrial spectrum, we're seeing all sorts of wonderful answers to this sustainable trend. This is these dance floors that use the piezoelectric technique, so that when the dance floors go up and down, they create electricity, which then creates is basically electricity for the club. This started actually in Holland. This was the world's first sustainable dance club. But again, we're seeing this idea of sustainability across the industrial spectrum. Many more planted roofs so that the things that we eat are closer to us. We're seeing crazy things, even like planted rooftops of buses, just to sort of show people that they get it. And then here is where I'm talking about sustainability when it comes to jets, because we're seeing all kinds of innovation happening with jet fuel, so that 20 years from now, the fuels that jets will be using, including electricity, will be much more sustainable than the fossil fuels that are being used right now. How crazy is the sustainability thing getting? I've seen these marketed in stores around the world. Organic water. Organic water, isn't all water organic? Like, why do you even have to say that? It's just because it's part of what we're doing right now. So finally, I wanted to just let you into my crystal ball about the future of big data, AI, and machine learning, because it's become so much part of our lives, and it will be, if it's not already, part of almost every single business. Most people don't realize that we all use AI and machine learning every day. If you use Gmail, then you're familiar with their autocomplete feature, where you're writing your Gmail and it fills in for you what you want to say before you even know you want to say it. That's artificial intelligence, which is learning from all the people that are using Gmail, including yourself. So you may have noticed that your Gmail autocompletes have gotten better in recent months than they were before. If you look at the way food is being grown, this is we're seeing more and more vertical gardens. And this is a slide. Hopefully you can see it in the middle. There's a drone. This is a drone farmer that goes up and down with a very high resolution camera, where it can see each and every single plant and understand if it needs more nutrients or light, and take care of it that way. I wonder how many of you have used Google Duplex. Google Duplex is it's a technology that books restaurant reservations and other appointments for you. It works seamlessly with other Google technologies. Sometimes I'm on Google, like I'll look up a restaurant and it will say, "Would you like me to book the reservation for you?" And then you put in, you say yes, you put in your parameters. And the cool thing about it is it then telephones the restaurant on a phone line and speaks in a human voice, so that the restaurant wouldn't even know that it's a machine. It understands humans and says, "Hey, can I get a reservation on Thursday at 5 o'clock?" The restaurant says, "Well, we're booked at 5, but would you do 5:30?" And they say, "Oh yeah, okay, 5:30 would work," having no idea it's a human being. When it comes to medicine, we're seeing more and more artificial intelligence genome projects. I was just in Estonia, where the country is creating a genome bank for everybody in the country. If you opt in, because of course there's some privacy issues with that, but the idea is to get everybody's genetic information so that artificial intelligence and machine learning can then study that and see what's happening in people's genes that are leading to different diseases, so they can be worked on before you catch it rather than afterwards, which is what medicine is doing right now. One of the biggest things that is in the trends world right now is artificial intelligence artists. And these AI bots are creating art as well as creating music, creating new video. In 20 years from now, perhaps they're going to put a lot of our artists and musicians and videographers out of business because AI is doing it right now. This actually is not AI. This is Vermeer, the girl with a golden earring. But this next slide is AI, where the AI was told to expand that painting, and by analyzing all the information that it has on the web, it was able to do what's called outpainting and create the environment that the girl with the golden earring may have been standing in when that was being painted. In the world of psychology, I think all of you should know about Wobot. It's an artificial intelligence psychologist. It's free online, and it apparently is pretty good at talking things out with you. When it comes to artificial intelligence, I think a lot of us know about the AI that can look at a facial recognition kind of AI. But did you know that same facial recognition is being used on fish farms to look at the faces of every single salmon in this case, so that it can tell if there's, first of all, count them, how many there are, or tell if there's any problems with them. That's just going to be normalized in the next 20 years. It's amazing to me to think about how much happened in the past 20 years. I mean, if you look at just the past 20 years, the Euro began, Xbox 360, Facebook, Spotify, the iPhone, 15 years old, Google Chrome, Bitcoin, FaceTime, drones, quadrocopter drones, CRISPR technology, AirPods, and on and on and on and on. And to think that it was just 15 years ago, in 2007, if I'm doing my math right, that the iPhone was invented. And yet, look how integral that is to all of our lives. I mean, we don't go anywhere without that phone. It's so much. It's changed the way that we even attend events. And you go to an event, and pretty much now you see everybody is holding up their phone at the event and sort of experiencing reality through a screen rather than being there. And it's what I loved about this slide is, can you spot the one woman from the generation who still knows how to enjoy the moment? So, I guess one of my takeaways is that technology, it's an amazing, wonderful tool. But of course, what I hope humanity will do is that we will always use technology for our advantage and not be used by technology. And that's basically my presentation. I think this sort of look at the next 20 years is super exciting. The look at what Avinode's done in the past 20 years is amazing. But the bottom line is that it's not just about tech, but it's about the people who are creating that tech. And that means you and me and all of us. And for that, I hope that it's going to be an amazing next 20 years. And thank you very much for having me present today.
Thank you, Daniel. That was so interesting and intriguing. I get so fascinated when you think about what's happened in these last few years, and it must be amazing being in your role and just researching and finding this stuff out. Was there something that you felt was very specific to travel or aviation that you found in your research?
Yeah, well, the thing about all of this, all of these trends, what's so amazing about them is that they're not siloed by industry. And a lot of what we're seeing in travel and aviation is related to these sort of big picture trends that we're seeing around the world. But for me, one of the most exciting things when it comes to aviation is about the fuels, because we already know how important the environment is to not just to our world, but to all of us, to most of us. And to see that these changes happening in aviation as well is really exciting, because I think it points to a very positive future for the industry.
Thank you again, Daniel. We appreciate you joining us, and it was intriguing. And you can, I guess, Google you if you want to know more about you, or invite you to come to your company, right? So thank you again, and we'll talk later. Bye. Well, I think this was fascinating, and I think it would be a good time to actually check in with you guys a little bit what you think about the future now after we have listened to Daniel. And I was thinking we could check in on a little bit, what do you think are important areas to focus on for us to future-proof our business in the next 20 or 50 years. So let's pull up a poll and ask around a little bit and see what we think are important things to cover and future-proof. And we'll give you 30 seconds to answer your questions there. Great. I think we are about to stop, and we'll pull up the results here to see a little bit what we all feel like and think of. Cool. I think it is fascinating to see how we all think different, and maybe this presentation with Daniel gave us new thoughts and ideas as well. But I think it's all about like looking at how do we engage in the future? How do we connect with the future? It's coming, it's changing, and it's more about how we interact with it than anything. And I think there's some great topics here in the results of the findings from what you answered as well, to what we could talk about in future No Talks. And you will actually be able to, in the end, send us topics that you would like us to cover in our No Talks for next year. So join in doing that as well. You know what? It's time for us to zoom in a little bit on a bit more focus around our business, a little bit focus around business aviation. And that's with great honor that I now am presenting two of my colleagues, Saskia and Harry, that will be presenting some things and findings around what we are working with in our day-to-day. So Saskia, she is Director of Customer Success, and her focus is to talk to our customers and engage, but also understand what is the needs in our markets. And she has so much great insight thanks to all the professional people she's talking to every day and every week. We will then be followed by one of my favorites, Harry, and he is so genius when it comes to data and numbers. And he connects all these numbers and helps us to give actionable insights on a very close future, understanding trends and data. So with that, I want to hand over to you, Saskia. How are you doing?
Hi, Sam.
Hi.
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Is it still early morning in Texas?
I'm beginning to wake up, so I think we're good.
You have your coffee ready, and you're ready to present some great stuff for us now.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So it was great to hear Daniel Levine, as an expert, talk about the future. So what I want to do for the next couple of minutes is really talk about you and what you've been planning in this industry, what you've been talking about, and really focus on our industry specific. And as Sam already mentioned, we really enjoy talking about our customers and talking with you, understanding what you're planning. So again, taking all of that information and understanding what you want to do in the future is what we're going to be looking at. Now, if we're talking about the next 20 years seems like such a long time. I mean, it really is the time from raising a child and sending them off to college or university. Now, that seems like a very long time, to me at least. But it's also the time that newer aircraft slots came into the industry. If you look at this picture, this is the Global 5000 that launched in 2002. And I know some of you speak with your customers and you refer to this aircraft as a newer aircraft. Well, that is 20 years ago. So again, if we look at it that way, 20 years does not seem that far. However, it is hard to talk about what you predict to be happening or what you're planning in the next 20 years. So I'm going to take a little bit of a step into what we think the industry will look like in the next 20 years. So growing wealth is the absolute determining factor for future growth in our industry. And there has been an enormous amount of growth, and Daniel mentioned this as well. We also continue to see that growth. We believe that, or we know that the ultra high net worth individual will continue to grow. At the same time, we also see that business aviation, they project a 3% average annual growth rate from deliveries, and that's in line with the worldwide long-term economic growth. Now, as wealth growth, we know that new people enter this industry. We also know that the cost of operations hopefully will remain flat. It's a little bit hard to say how much we will grow in the future, how much wealth will grow, and how much we as an industry will grow. And that has to do with how much technology will take over. If we are able to reduce our costs, the growth of our industry might become so much bigger. So it's to be seen. Now, let's take a look at the different markets. And this is how the markets look today. And as you can see, the US has really the majority of the private jets in our market. Europe is a close second. We don't predict much change with this. I know Asia was a big dream a decade ago, and it looks no closer. I would say the only market that could be a surprise development would be Africa. And again, that's something to be seen in the future. Now that we've looked at so far in the future, in 20 years, let's take a step back and let's take a look at what the next 5 to 10 years can do, and really what you've been saying about the next 5 to 10 years. I would say one of the most popular topics that we talk about today is data and the desire of using data to predict the future, and really looking at historical data, historical pricing, again, to make better decisions and to ultimately run your business more efficient and being able to increase your bottom line. So I know that Daniel spoke about big data. He spoke about artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning. And when I talk about big data and artificial intelligence in our industry with you, I think one of the big topics that comes up is optimization, and specifically fleet optimization, the desire to reduce costs and to increase your efficiency on your fleet. Now, this is something that came over from the commercial airline industry, and it is the ability to plan, to better schedule, and to suggest changes powered by artificial intelligence. And this is definitely something that is a topic that we hear more and more these days. Second to that is revenue management. It's really using the data from past historic events and using data from the competition to see how you should price your operation. And yield management has been something that's been used by the travel industry for many years, and we are starting to see this in our industry as well. Maybe you should price differently based on different routes. Maybe you should price differently based on the day of the week. Things that people are starting to think about. Customer insights is another thing that is gaining popularity. What do I mean with that? Is really creating a customer experience that is optimal for your customer. There's a lot of people these days that are using CRM systems, and making sure that you connect the CRM system with your booking platform. We have backend APIs that will allow you to connect CRM systems with our systems. Again, once you're quoting, that you have your customer information with you once you're quoting, and you know exactly what the preference of your customer are. So those are things that we see increasing as well. Now, let's take a look at some things that are hot in the travel industry. And we really believe that looking at the travel industry gives us a sense what is coming to our industry. And I think right here what we see is voice assistants and chatbots, something that's really getting popular in the travel industry, but also other industries. So I'm curious to see what is going to be taken over by our industry from that. We already spoke about revenue management. And then the other part that you see right here is the biometric recognition. And Daniel spoke a little bit about this as well. Let's see what will be implemented in the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to facial recognition. Now, the ultra net or high net worth individual is a unique person. And I think Daniel spoke about this as well. It's definitely someone who wants to have that personal touch. But we do believe that customers would like to have a digital travel experience. And let's take a look at the next slide. So we don't think that everyone would need to book online, but perhaps you would just want to make sure that you could view all of your bookings, or maybe be able to request a change, maybe being able to pay for your trip, either online or at least through your mobile device. So if we now look at the travel industry one more time in the next couple of graphs, and again, digitalization is a trend. We saw over the last, in this case, 8 years, definitely a change on how people book on the commercial airlines industry or the travel industry. They went from booking with a travel agent, so the brick and mortar, to booking online. And this is a trend that we have also seen on our end. If we look at Avinode, we measure where trips are coming from in Avinode, and we've actually seen an increase in trips that are being searched through third-party applications. And third-party application can be a web application that's on your website to get an inquiry about price, or it could be a booking application that you've created on your iPhone app, but it's definitely an increasing number. So the desire of being able to book online is there. I would say that these trips are typically the trips that are booked on smaller aircraft. So that is a trend that we're seeing as of right now, and we're carefully monitoring. Let's talk about something else, mergers. I think everyone sees mergers in the news. I would say maybe not every week, but it's pretty frequent. We expect them to continue to happen. One thing that might be interesting to point out is that we've also seen brokers starting to acquire operator certificates. And that is something that I'm curious to see if we will continue to see that in the future. Every merger is obviously unique, but there could be a connection that there is a need to access supply. Obviously, last year in the United States, it was a extreme when it comes to supply and demand. The summer in Europe became pretty challenging as well. So perhaps a reason for operators to continue expanding and having that supply available, and really the same reason for brokers to being able to have access to a fleet themselves. Curious to see what will continue there. Last thing is the seat sharing model. And this was very popular pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic happened, and we're kind of curious to see what would happen. But if we hear the news, people still like to do the seat sharings. The companies that offer seat sharing seem to be doing very well. So we will continue to see if this continues to grow. And this might also be driven by new customers entering our segments. I mean, the new flyer might start with seat sharing, and then also technology. I mean, if we are getting these autonomous flying vehicles out there, the eVTOLs, that could be per seat as well. So it's interesting to see what would happen here. I think overall, what's kind of been the theme is that I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I had, and I'm sure all of you wish I could give you one, but we don't. And ultimately, what we need to do is look at previous experiences and look at data. And then we might be able to make better assumptions. So with that being said, I think I am going to introduce my colleague Harry, who is our data expert, and he will be able to at least give you some peek and some insights on the data that we have. Harry, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Saskia. As Saskia mentioned, yeah, I guess my challenge is to be that crystal ball to a certain extent. And I will give it a go. I'm going to use data that is just kind of passing through the Avanode marketplace and kind of try and make some interpretations based on that, just a few. And yeah, let's crack on. It's going to be a little bit shorter timescale. I can't really give accurate things what's going to happen in 5-10 years, but I can certainly kind of give a few inklings of what might happen in the next 1 to 2 months. So going to start by talking about some pricing trends. And we've got 2 charts here, one for trips within Europe, one for trips within the USA. And what you're looking at here is basically the median and the average mean pricing quote per hour over a 5-year period. So we go from the left-hand side being start of 2018 to the right-hand side being where we are today. Both of these charts obviously show that pretty steady increase throughout of those prices just going up for the quotes that we kind of aggregate through the Avanode marketplace. What's interesting is if you overlay this with the fuel prices, obviously the two are very, very strongly correlated, particularly in the US. It very much mirrors exactly kind of what happened there. On the European side, it appears that there's been able to be a bit more, if you look at some of those seasonal trends, there's more seasonality there, and there's been more of an ability to really push some yields in certain periods, kind of independent of that fuel price. I think if we talk a bit more, extending that, the insights further, is how can we decouple that fuel price relationship with the prices charged to be less kind of one-to-one relationship? I think that's the big opportunity, and I think as Saskia was talking about data and optimization, all these things, that's kind of the link that needs to be kind of pursued in order to kind of achieve that for the future. Let's shift focus a little bit. Let's look at demand, and we're just going to look at demand within Europe. Once again, this is just looking at data flowing through the Avanode marketplace. So we're looking at trips that are kind of being sourced, and we aggregate that up, and we clean it, and we try and make some interpretations based on it. Now, this chart is a little bit complicated, so I'll just spend a little bit of time explaining what it is you're looking at. Each of these lines is an entire departure month. So it's the entire kind of trips, the journeys that we see passing through Avanode for that month. On the y-axis, you've got the year-over-year difference percentage. So what that is saying how much better 2022 is looking than 2021. On the x-axis, you've got 6 months in advance on the left-hand side, going all the way through to kind of the end of the month, which is that 0 days on the right-hand side. What this is showing is basically the build-up of demand over time for a departure month, both historically and into the future as well. A couple of things to pull out here. First of all, for all these months, September through December, which is December 2022, all of them started really a lot stronger this year. The demand started building a lot earlier this year than it did last year. You can see obviously those figures are really very high, and obviously there's no way that was going to stay, but it really showed how much more people were able to this year really think about sourcing travel further in advance. You can see what happened with September and October. They kind of dropped off as we got closer to the end of the month, as you would expect. And they kind of October finished down year over year compared to 2021. When we look at November, there's still half a month to go with November before we know the final result, but November is kind of following that October trend very much. So expecting kind of another decrease year over year compared to 2021. What's interesting though, I think, is December. You can see the December line, that kind of black dashed line. That's really been holding steady for the entire period, and it's still holding steady today. So I am expecting that to drop once again, unfortunately. But what I would say is that the early prediction would be that for demand within Europe, December is not going to be as negative year over year as November will finish, I would say. Okay, one slide and a couple of charts for me to finish up on. We have a major event incoming, and no surprises for what it is I'm talking about. On the left-hand side, we've got a demand forecast for 2022, just to this region. And on the right-hand side, we've got that same period of time, but we're looking at pricing this time. What's the region? It's the Middle East. We're looking at just demand into the Middle East from everywhere apart from Russia, just because we need to remove that from our stats to make it a bit clearer to look at the trends. We're seeing such huge increases in demand. We always see a massive increase, obviously, when you have major events. But for arrivals into Qatar for the next month or two, we're up over 2,000%. It's such huge numbers. That travel is mainly from the UAE. Obviously, there's a lot of kind of shuttling back and forth going to be going on there, but then also from Saudi and from the UK as well. I think maybe more interesting than the fact that there's lots of demand happening, which you would really obviously expect, is what's going on in the pricing on the right-hand side. And this is the quote price per hour once again, and you've got that median line is the middle one, so that's the middle of the market pricing, and that's jumped up, as we would guess. We've got the 80th percentile, which really talks about the top range of the pricing, and that's jumped up hugely. And then we've got the 20th percentile, which is the bottom end of the pricing. And that's jumped up too. So they've all jumped up, but they've jumped up by different amounts. The top end has jumped up by over 100%, whereas the bottom end has jumped up by kind of 17% was the figure I calculated here, roughly. I think that what that shows is that there's a real spread of pricing going on heading into this event. There's a lot of quoting going on, which is really quite astronomical compared to what's happened in the past. But there's still some quotes going on which are kind of more what you might expect. So it will be interesting to see when the event's over to kind of hear back around, okay, well, of those kind of really astronomical prices that were kind of quoted, how many of them really were able to translate into bookings, and how much did the quotes, which were kind of increased but not by quite so much, kind of get the booking instead. That will be interesting to find out. So yeah, very much thank you for listening. Hopefully that was insightful just for the next couple of months. If you've got any further questions, points or whatever, then don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. So interesting to listen to you, and I just love all the details and the facts of the numbers, and when you pull it out on a graph, how it can actually make sense and we can take actions on it.
Definitely.
So thank you, and thank you also, Saskia. You have been great, and I think it's been so fun to listen to the team. I enjoy listening to both of you, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and insights. And if you, on the other side, want to get in contact with Harry, Saskia, or anyone in the Avinode Group team, well, just reach out to us. We have our details on our website, and there will be a link in the end of this show where you can actually get in contact with us. Super nice. I think we are going to go to the next session, which is eavesdropping on the Avinode Group's executive team. We're going to listen into a conversation that they have and will have about how we will future-proof our business. What are we thinking about? What's in our minds to ensure that we are set up to make you guys succeed in the future? So while we're setting the studio here, we will soon move over to Alex, Oliver, and Per that will share some of their thoughts and thinkings that's been going on in our heads, in our company. So I think we're ready to move over, and I'll hand over to Alex and the gang.
Per,
Alex?
you've been with Avinode now for 20 years, right?
Yeah, even more, but...
Even more? We're celebrating 20 years today, so how do you explain that?
Well, I mean, Avinode did come out of the Master Thesis project at Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship, so there were a couple of months where we were still students trying to figure our way. And then it turned into this. Who could have thought that?
So, 20 years later-ish, how will you make sure that you keep yourself as sharp for the upcoming 20 years?
I think it comes back to the roots. I mean, sure, we had bad timing starting Avinode in August of 2001, 6 months after the dot-com bubble busted, 3 weeks after 9/11, or 3 weeks before 9/11. Meant that you had to be curious, you had to be constantly able to shift direction. But most importantly is talking with customers and being out there. We have had fun, so much fun for the last 20 years, and that's what I think is what keeps us motivated and moves forward.
So we're going to have fun for the upcoming 20 years. That's awesome. So
It's a promise from Per.
yes, it is, and I look forward to it. So we, along with other people in the management group here at Avinode Group, we talk about how we can future-proof our business, and we talk about that not once a year or twice even. We talk about that more often than that. Especially this year, considering that we are celebrating 20 years, I would say that we have looked at a longer time horizon than previously, because often you go, okay, what's our 3-year plan, or 5 or 10? But this year I think it's been fun because we've looked at not necessarily having the answers for the 20 years, but still. So what we're going to do now is to share what we have been discussing as different things together, right?
Are you setting us up to say how you future-proof an organisation? Is that the idea here?
I think so, right? Because we talk about our organization all of the time, and we can talk about the industry, but I think we have some interesting, hopefully, things to share.
I think this is you talked about this year we're taking a longer view forward, and I think it is 20 years, as Per has said, but I think there's also a dynamic which I suspect most companies are experiencing. We've been locked down for 2 years, and now we all pop up, and we're looking at a time horizon that is not measured in months, it's now back to measured in years. And having just come off MBAA, where people, great to meet, but everyone is talking about now we want to do business together. Everybody's thinking about it. And I think we're at a super time for our industry, because you've got things like electrification underway. You've got big challenges in the background, like what do we do in terms of sustainability as an industry? But you've also got real trends emerging on the technology front, which every company, yes, we're a technology company, we look especially at those areas, but every company needs to have a think about what's going on here. I don't know I have the secret formula to future-proof your company, but I think execs at across every company need to be looking what's going on around, talking to customers, talking to their employees about what kind of environments do they want to work in, and thinking about what type of company do they want to be going forward. So there's a lot to kind of look at and think about here.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously discussing all those things that you just mentioned, but we are also looking at it more of a, sometimes like, what do we do now to make sure that we would become more successful later? So you mentioned, employees, right? Per,
Yeah,
you know how it's been the last, I would say, a year.
Yeah, I mean, attracting and retaining top talent. I mean, I think it's Richard Branson that said it's the employee first, customer second, because if you take care of your employees, then it will solve. And I do find it's fascinating that it really doesn't matter what type of company you are, in almost whatever industry, you do have such parallels that we all can learn from each other, that even though we are not an operator or a broker, and we will never be either, I mean, even though people have asked me for 20 years, I mean, we do have similarities. And attracting top talent and retaining is key. And that's probably been the most turbulent thing that we have all encountered, no matter where in the world, for the last 2 years.
We had the Great Resignation last year. It was a year ago. We were shocked, right?
Yeah, and here we are sat in our offices here in Gothenburg. We moved into this office just before the pandemic, thinking it would be a home for 100 noders. Yep. And on a normal work day, we only have a handful of noders, because most of our company, and that includes the US pair where your team sits, are working remotely. And so we as a company have had to find our way through it. And that's just a smaller example of, when we talk about the future, that ability to change, that in technology, everyone talks about agility, almost over talks about agility. But every company needs to be able to experiment, to learn, and to improve. Because the one thing that's clear on the future, and you've seen this over 20 years, Per, is we don't stay where we are. It's the companies that are constantly trying to improve, continuously improve. They're the ones that can go from success to success, because they're always thinking about what comes next.
Yeah, and when we say improve, what does that really mean? Is it how you work? Is it, what you're offering towards the market. I mean, we are considering both of these things, right? Because
yeah, they are essential.
yeah,
They are essential.
and how we work has been essential for us for the last 5 years, I think. However, looking forward, I think that we have said that now it's a great time to really accelerate these things that we have been talking about. So.
Yeah, no, and I think at times we are, as all companies, better at maybe figuring out what we want to bring to market. I mean, you do surveys, you go out listening, you get feedback. That's sometimes an easier way. But investment into the people and how we do the work, not what we deliver, becomes more importantly.
Yep.
I mean, the entire US organization is now remote. I mean, we have a total of 65 people across the US in so many states. Also makes it a challenge on how to improve, how to create the right tools, create the right infrastructure, provide the right data. And that's no difference than what every company needs to do, because you want your highest valued asset, your employees, to be as efficient as possible. This working in multiple spreadsheets, copy and pasting in between, having people keep in mind what the details are about certain customers. We talk a lot about customer success. We know that it starts with people success, understanding our customer, understanding the people, the first names of our customers. And that is a major change. And that's one of the things that's really excited for next year's and the couple of years ahead of us.
And you talk about customer success. As you look across our company, we've had to adopt so many best practice SaaS software offerings to do everything from customer service to marketing automation. We invest in that portfolio of tools that we as a company have. And it's really interesting as I look across the industry, you could see the same happening across our wider industry. We now face, customers, our customers who are going out looking for solutions now face a range of really good offerings. And it's interesting to see how the industry needs to start connecting all of these data flows to really help customers achieve what they want to do. There's quite a period coming up of change.
It certainly is. I think we've done a lot of change the last few years because we've been, even if it's people success, we always put our customers first, and we have said as a company, one of our core values is to build relationships, and we do that continuously with our customers, obviously. And we want to create this service excellence all the time. But to be able to do that, we do need to have these fundamentals of the sort of best practices in the tools that allow us to do that. And we have done that investment recently, but I think we have some excelling to do still.
And I think we've gotten to the conclusion also that it's not a one-time investment.
Absolutely
it's a continuous
not.
investment that you constantly need to raise the bar.
Yeah.
Because we might say that we are in a luxury, or the industry is a luxury concierge, high-touch service. That usually meant that you were dealing with a one-on-one communication, and it usually meant you asked a question and had someone respond to it over phone or email. And that was considered what you wanted and needed to deliver. But as other luxury experiences now are relying on technology as part of the delivery, so does our industry need to do it. I mean, technology is not going to replace high-touch customer service, but it is going to be an essential customer complement to it. We know that. I mean, people like dealing with our noders, but they also want to self-service whenever they can. So how do you create a structure where you can do both? And I think that goes for brokers and operators, both when it deals with the internal employees and with the customers. And that, I think, is going to be a shift that we started to see. But it's still very manual and a lot of copy and pasting across the industry today of information and data, etc.
Yeah, so a future proof to conclude in that area is?
For me, if I think about how Avanode started at 20 years, the three of you were out on the road seeing customers and contacting customers in a personal basis. As a company grows, it gets more difficult to do that. But today, with the tools that are available, we can have feedback flowing from customers in real time across the applications. We can see what customers are doing. We can actually then respond in real time about what customers' desires are, what they need, what they're trying to do. And as Per said, the traditional idea of great service is always built around that human touch. And it's never going to disappear from our industry, but how you deal with that and provide that is changing. And I
Yes.
think that's a really, if we look forward over the next 20 years, we've seen digitalization within the wider travel industry. It's coming to our industry,
Absolutely.
along with everything else.
Yeah, and if you as you listen to Daniel Levine, when he's talking about AI and data flows, it might be some abstract thing. However, AI doesn't mean that it's not personal in that sense. So I think we have some learnings to do overall around that topic. So that doesn't mean that you lose that sense of service.
And if you look at Amazon, if you look at Netflix, how they have managed to personalize the offering thanks to AI to make it even more valuable,
Yes.
there's no reason why our industry cannot do the same.
No.
And I really strongly believe that the view of old school, that you had a monolith, that you have one system that was a closed system, that's not going to work in the future. If you're not on an interconnected platform today, you're going to be constrained in the future.
Absolutely.
I mean, APIs, integrations, I mean, you will need to source. And we do that internally when we go out and get software to run our business. It's not one provider, it's multiple things, because you want the best in class.
Yeah, you want the tool that is, providing the best service to the needs that we have. You don't want to compromise on that, right? But they need to work together, which is what we are working on internally all the time, right?
And I can't wait to have those real efficiencies coming out of the work we have been doing and what we're doing, so that our notice can be even more focused on not copying and pasting, but being personal, being available, dealing with customers' problems and working together to deliver value. And I think there's so many people out there that sit in the same situations if you're an operator, broker, or whatever service provider.
Absolutely.
So you can see we get excited as we talk about the future.
Yeah, but we are. Should we leave it at that and no more chatting around from us now?
I'm happy to do so. But as always, we're always interested in both customers' views and any other feedback that comes.
We do.
Well, I love you chatting, guys. Thank you so much for sharing some of your thoughts and minds. And I really think like we're all in the same boat, or maybe better to say we're all in the same plane, moving on into the future and looking at that. And we were looking at our feelings in the beginning and how do we feel about the future. And I don't know if that changed in this session, but I hope it gave you some ideas and thoughts and inspiration, and maybe some thinking to do as well, taking back and looking in how we all move into 2023 and onwards. So thank you all of the people that has been joining us on the platform here, speaking, from Daniel to the Avinode Group team. I appreciate all of you taking time and effort, and I hope really that has been something that sends something back to all of you guys. So we're ending this session very, very soon. We would love to get some input and thoughts to how you felt this event was. We are having a survey that you can give us some feedback. In the survey, you can also give us some thoughts and ideas of what topics that you would like us to cover in next year's No Talks. And we would love to get your input so we can actually create these sessions where it's valuable, impactful for you and your business, and where we together can continue to grow and evolve what the future may hold for all of us. And with that said, I hope you will enjoy the rest of your day. And as Oliver said in the end, we always want to be in contact with all of you guys. And if you want to reach out, contact me or anyone in our team, well, look us up online, check us out on LinkedIn, or send us an email, and we will definitely get back to you. So good, and thank you for joining. Have a good day.